Come on, Shorty. Ugh, your hair like chewing gum.
Big ox. Darling, Wanda the witch. Your bargain spray's the problem. Watch this cotton test. It sticks. Away with that problem. Try Hidden Magic, the perfect solution. Holds without being sticky. See? Hardly any sticks.
How'd you get rid of the chewing gum?
A little witchery. New Hidden Magic, the problem-solving hairspray.
Welcome back, artists, to the second installment of our Crafting Tracy's Charm series. Whether you're following along in our class or joining us from YouTube, get ready to take your sewing skills to the next level. In this episode, we're delving deeper into the art of garment construction, covering the secrets behind stay stitching, base stitching, perfecting darts, mastering the art of ironing seams, and crafting elegant collars. Get your sewing machines ready and this supply list on the screen because you're about to embark on an exciting journey together. Stay tuned for an unforgettable experience that blends education and creativity in equal measure. These pattern instructions are divided by units. Even though we are doing view B, the guide sheet has all dress views start with view A, as they are all variations on the same dress. Let's begin with dress A, unit 1, front. Step 1, stay stitch neck edges of front, make bust darts. So all the instructions are kind of multi-step. So just think of it as units, and in step 1, we're going to do a couple of different things. Now, because this is stay stitching, we can go through it rather quickly, but make sure that your fabric and thread isn't bunching up as we are sewing around the bias. And remember to always clip your threads as you go. Do not wait to the end. Here I'm laying out my front so that way I can clearly see where all of my darts are, where I need to begin, and to make sure that I don't accidentally fold some crease into my dart. We want everything to be very, very even, flat, and straight as possible. It's one thing that I really enjoy about using the grid cutting board is that you can easily see when your pattern is a little off, if your lines are a little off. Because I know how to draft, I'm a stickler about things lining up. As you will see when I pin, as I'm pinning, I want to make sure that my cross axis is precise, that the point where my pin goes in the front, it comes out the same point in the back every single time. Pinning is very, very important to making sure that your garment looks balanced, even, professional, and that you gave a lot of care and dedication to your art, because this is an art form. Please notice how even these pins are. Like, did I use a ruler? I did not. I've just been doing this a very long time. But this is what you want to see. You want to see things that are very even. And then as you're sewing, you kind of get into your own like rhythm and pace. Stitch, 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 take your pin out. Stitch, 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 take your pin out. Now, you're really not supposed to stitch over pins. Do we do it? Yes. Why? There's a couple different reasons. Sometimes it's just a matter of hand-eye coordination, which you will see that your foot is going here, your hands are going there, and you just don't make it. Other times you actually need that pin to be in place to hold things. As it just at the end of this dart here, like I kind of leave it in, I take a stitch or two over it because I really want to make sure that my beginning and ends are very secure. And of course I'm going to clip those threads. I clip the beginning threads and the ending threads. So here I'm sewing that very, very long front dart that almost makes this dress have like a princess line cut. There's really two main ways to shape a garment around the body. You have darts, which radiate out from the points. If you were in my class, you know what a point to point is, your point to halter. Essentially, those are your nipples, from one nipple radiating out from, was that like 180 degrees out on either side. Or you can go ahead and split the front of your garment, create internal concaves and convex shapes to create a princess line garment. So here I'm gonna go ahead and press. Ironing is key. You have to pin evenly, you have to iron and repeat and repeat and repeat. This is a very slow process. There's really no way to get around it. If you want your garment to look professional and just beautiful at the end, like some people ask, like, how come your garment looks like it's brand new by the time you're done finishing constructing it? It's because I press as I go. Now, I always believe and was kind of taught in school that you should press your darts towards your seam allowance or your back seam and not towards your front seam. And at first I thought this was kind of just like wardrobe woo-woo, but I actually really do agree. And that bust dart, you should iron it down. That way when the body is in it, it sort of like pulls down instead of pulling up. And we want the garment to lay flat. Unit 2, back. Step 4, stay stitch neck edges of back section. Make shoulder dart. I purposely left this part where my thread comes out of the needle because this happens to everybody, and I get comments every year about like, how do we stop it? What happens is that there just isn't enough thread before you raise up the needle and start sewing, and so it gets sucked back in, and I call it the suck zone. The purpose of stay stitching is to keep your fabric from stretching as it goes over the bias. And the bias, if anyone doesn't know, is that fabric is made in warp and weft. So think of just like this grid table that I'm on, we have an XY axis. If you were to go diagonal from that 90-degree angle at a 45-degree angle, that will be your bias. As you're going around the neck, you are slowly going into the bias and then out of the bias. So we stay stitch on our seam line, on our stitch line, to make sure that it doesn't overly stretch. We don't really have a problem with this for flat fabric and muslin, which is why muslin is a great beginner fabric. But it is an issue when you get into knits or just nicer fabric. It definitely shears. Sometimes you need to stay stitch, you have to fray check, and you need to serge that Bama Jamma to make sure that the loose weaves of other sheer fine fabrics aren't just like moving and sliding as you're stitching. That happens a lot with the differential feed, the feed dog. So as you're sewing, there are those little grabbers underneath your foot pedal. Those are called feed dogs. So as the feed dogs are pulling, the bottom of your fabric is moving faster and faster and faster than the top fabric. That's part of why we pin like crazy. That's why we base stitch. That's why we stay stitch. It's all in preparation for making your final garment to make sure that things are not slowly but surely inching their way out of alignment. Here I am sewing my shoulder back dart. those threads. And now I'm sewing my back body dart, that long dart that's very similar to a princess line seam, but is in fact a dart. Back to the ironing board. I just want to always remind everyone that you do not have to do really any of the things I'm doing standing. I think that as we move away from ableism and a world of which everyone feels compelled to stand up all the time, we should let ourselves sit down and take care of ourselves even as we're sewing, because sewing is really hard on your body. Like, talk to my rotator cuff, talk to my carpal tunnel about sewing, and they have lots of stories to tell you about how hard sewing is on your body. Step 5, find the caret on the center back. Carets are those triangles that we cut in from the previous video, in case you forgot. Stitch from this point to the end of the dress. So this is a tutorial for a mock-up and not a wearable dress. We are going to sew the seam and then iron down the seam allowance, but I am not going to put in a zipper. If you would like me to make another video, and I would actually really love to make this dress in a regular fabric, I'm gonna do the cheesy YouTuber thing and say, like this video and leave a comment, because I would actually really like to know if people would genuinely want to see me make this dress again in fabric and show you how it could fit a real person. Here I am, once again, pinning every 2 inches or so. It's really just the best habit to get into. Pin a lot, keep a lot of pins on hand. You know, really, I love my little wrist pin cushion because it just encourages you to pin more, and that's what we want. So in case I haven't mentioned this, every time you start your seam, you should take about 3 stitches forward, as I'm doing here, 3 stitches back, and then continue stitching. Why do we do this? It creates a lock or a knot. Just like in hand stitching, you need to knot your thread before you keep going or you're going to pull it out. The same is true for machine sewing. I think the pattern for sewing is stitch, clip threads, iron, repeat. Stitch, clip threads, iron, repeat. That's kind of the whole process. Like, sewing is both incredibly difficult and then also very easy and repetitive, and it truly is a matter of gaining hand-eye coordination and just the repetitiveness of these skills. That's why I really like making very simple garments with beginners, because it's like you have to get these foundations down. You really need to train your eye to be able to look and see in 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 2 inches, 4 inches. Like, you need to develop this type of fabric measurement awareness, and you only get that by practicing. Yeah, sewing is hard. Yes, you burn your fingers, but it's worth it. Step 6, stitch back and front, shoulder, and side seams together. We always, unless specified, are going to stitch or put our right sides together. That way, when you turn it inside out, all, and I mean all, of your seams will be on the inside of the garment instead of half of them on the inside, half of them on the outside. This is a cardinal rule. It's like clip your threads, iron your seams, right sides together. These are just like the bylaws of sewing. If sewing was a cult, these would be the commandments. You get me? Once again, I am going to make sure that I am putting that pin right at that cross axis. It really is that important that I'm going to just keep saying it and keep showing it in this video, because it makes a huge difference in your sewing. I'm starting here at the shoulder seam, but you could start at any seam. It really doesn't matter. What does matter is that, as you can tell, I'm getting my fabric very straight. I want to make sure that my front, which is on the bottom, and my back, which is on the top, I can tell that by the shoulder dart. I want to make sure that everything is laid flat, that I have pinned my dart fabric down. So again, I like to make sure that my darts are going towards either the side seam or a center back seam, but that they are moving in a direction that is beneficial for the final finish and laying of my garment on the body. Clip your threads and head back to your ironing board.
Maybe it's not married. Maybe it's love.
Well, whatever it is, put it in a delicate view.
I've got a feeling love don't have to be the way you say it is.
Well, tell me that way with me. But I've only enough one man. I've got a hunch I'm never going to feel no other kind of love.
Dress B, Unit 3, Collar. Step 1. To reinforce tie collar, stitch along seam line for 1 inch. Now I know these numbers don't make any sense because we jumped back to Unit 3, which is for Dress B view. The numbers started all over again. That's how the pattern makers made it, and that's what we're just going to follow. This pattern is asking us to reinforce this one spot because once we put the collar on and the tie, this point is where the tie hangs off of the dress, and it has a lot of potential for stress as the person wears this garment. Step 2. Fold collar in half lengthwise with right sides together. Matching small dots. Stitch tie at center back. Seam. Stitch ties from reinforced small dot to point. That sounds very complicated, but it is not. We are simply just folding the tie in half and sewing from one dot to the other dots to make both the part of our collar that gets attached and the part of the collar that does not get attached. That's kind of what I think is sort of interesting about this pattern, is that you get both a collar tie little combination.
You should go now. Run. No, I won't leave you here. We can run together. Listen, if we run together, they will shoot us from behind. We both die. So, how's about you here? They will kill you. No, don't worry about me. I will hold them. I want you to promise me to survive, to take this message for our country.
I wanted to show you a close-up of how to pivot. So you're going to go to the end, make sure that your needle is down, raise your presser foot, and then you can pivot from there. Drop your presser foot down and keep sewing. Now that we've sewn the front of the tie, let's go ahead and sew the center back of the tie. This is the part that is going to align with your zipper if you are making this for a real dress. For us, it's just going to align with the center back of our mock-up. Once I'm done sewing, I'm going to go ahead and cut down my seam allowance. Step 3, turn the tie collar right side out, press base raw edges together. I'm cutting down my seam allowances because I want my tie to be as flat as possible. And when you get down to those little points at the end, having multiple streams of fabric kind of converging together will make your tie very bumpy. I also tend to cut right angles at a 45-degree angle, so like diagonal or on a diamond cut. That's just something that I picked up from other seamstresses, stitchers, dressmakers, because it kind of cuts out the fabric in really clever ways, and everything ends up folding up very, very smooth and gets ironed out flat when you go in and do all these little tricks and things that we do to make things flat. Feel free to use a pencil or a pen, just something that's not too sharp to try to get your corners out. I have made the mistake of using my little snips or something very sharp like a seam ripper and completely shredded the end of my collars, the ends of things that you have to turn inside out. So learn from my mistake. I do use safety pins, but the rubber end on a regular number 2 pencil works really, really well. Just be sure that the rubber doesn't leave marks on your fabric, because I've had that happen too. To base your tie collar edges, you're going to need to thread your needle. So get some thread. I'm using purple only because I was hoping that it would show up well on the camera. Normally I would be sewing this in either white or beige. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the dirty swirl, where you put your threads opposite of your needle, wrap it around a couple times, and then slide down to the end. Et voila, there's a knot. There's also another way that I'll show in a little bit of how to knot your thread. Now, base stitching is simply a running stitch that is a little bit larger than your normal putting together a garment stitch. The purpose is for guidance as well as to secure things together. Now, I made the mistake here of not basting on my actual stitch line. I was thinking that for the camera and people seeing it, it'd be better that I didn't do that, but as I got into sewing and putting my collar on, I realized that I actually needed my base stitching to be on the stitch line. So learn from my mistake. Sew your base on your stitch line. Do not go above it. I ended up just taking a marker, as you'll see later, and marking where that line should be so that you all can see it and that I could see it, because I got tired of trying to look through the fabric weave as to where I need to sew. This is the other method of tying off your thread. It's often referred to as the dirty roll, because you wrap the thread around your finger once and then you roll it off. Sometimes people lick their finger. I tend to put my finger in a little bit of water since I work professionally around people. I don't want to put my hands in my mouth as I'm sewing on set or for somebody else. You know, keep that saliva contamination down. At this point, I like to just give my garment a once over. Take a little stretch break, move around, look at something different, and just see how's it doing. How does it look? Are things lining up? Am I going forward? Am I going backwards? Do I like it? Have I made any mistakes? Like, what am I missing? Just, you know, let all the feelings just flow on out, but also take a moment to look at this awesome garment that you're creating. Like, you did this. Like, this is from your hands. I love sewing, and I will always cheer people to keep on keeping on. Yeah, so let's get a close-up of that shoulder, that beautiful dart seam. Like, who has been ironing? I've been ironing. Step 4, clip neck edges of dress to stay stitch along curves. Pin collar to neck edges. Now, as you'll see in this video, I do it just the opposite, because it never has ever made sense to me why in instructions they have you clip something before you know exactly when and where and why and how to clip. So what I like to do is pin things in place. As I'm pinning, I always pin sort of like north, south, east, west, or left, right, center, and then the center of that center, the center of the center, and keep going as I'm matching up my dots, as I'm making sure that things are, once again, balanced and even. Then that's when I can assess where there is maybe too much fabric on one side, not enough fabric on this side, and where I need to clip. If I were just to randomly clip, I might overclip, I might underclip, I might also, it gives me a chance to see at what angle do I need to clip. You really need to be perpendicular, not to use another math term, but there's so much math in sewing. Like, you kind of have to take at least geometry to know some of the basic sewing terms, but you need to make sure that you are clipping perpendicular to your thread line, as you'll see me do in just a moment here. So I can tell, even as I'm looking at this video, that right here is this fabric is on the bias because of the way that the threads are going. So I'm just going to clip kind of intermittently, and then I'm stretching to see, do I need to clip a little bit more? And I can feel that right underneath the flap that is what is pulling. Again, if I were just to go in and just like clip, I wouldn't really know what I'm doing and to which angles I need to clip to get the best results, to make sure that my concave and convex curves are properly fitting into each other. For the purpose of this video, I went ahead and made a dotted line so that you can see where I'm sewing, but I want to make sure that you understand what my hands are doing right now. So I have clipped, I have basted, I've pinned like the Dickens, but something you may not notice is that I am actually pulling this seam, not only because I want everything to be straight and flat, but also because of the differential feed of something that is this thick, is this complex, and has so much going on with the concave and convex curves. And that is another part of sewing, is that your hands need to learn where to be and how to pull and work in conjunction with your feet. That's part of why sewing is so hard, because it does require your hand, eye, feet, brain, concentration, and all working in conjunction together. Well, that concludes part 2. We have done so much. This is so many steps. If you are still watching and have gotten this far, you're either in my class and this is a requirement, or you really actually do want to learn how to make this dress. Once again, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and like and leave a comment of some sorts if you want to see me make this dress for real and learn how to do zipper, buttonholes, the whole shebang. I would love to do it. I would love to make more videos. I genuinely enjoy sewing. It's not just something I do for money, but it is actually my hobby. I'm a sewing nerd and I'm proud of it. Anyways, have a great day, holiday, weekend, whatever time you're watching this, whatever space, dimension you're in. I hope you're making art. I hope you're loving yourself, and I hope you're staying hydrated. Bye.